the four inductees and the representatives up for the panel. So I think we have one more who's going to be representing one of the inductees. So if there's anybody else, come on up. If not, we'll get started. I'm Larry Luxembourg, president of the AT Museum. Ron Tipton, who I think most of the people in the room know after his half-century of service to the Appalachian Trail. Don Hudson is representing Dick Anderson from the IAT, and Don has been involved with the International Appalachian Trail since I think the very first minute.
Very first minute, yes.
Yeah, and
Janice Klein, and I'm here representing Walter Green.
okay, so you're president of the Maine Appalachian Trail Club. So welcome everybody. I'm going to have each of the inductees or representatives give a brief introduction, and then we'll continue with some questions. Bill O'Brien is co-hosting this, but he's setting up an exhibit for Gene Espy in the main room. So when you go to the banquet later on, you'll be able to see that exhibit for Gene Espy, the second through hiker. So welcome everybody, and for the panelists, this microphone is for our recording. It doesn't carry to the room, so you have to project to the room just unaided. So welcome. So Ron, if you want to
Should I move over to this chair?
Get started.
Yep. Well, good morning, everyone. I know most of the people in this room, and I have to say that this is a very special day in my life to be honored and for the AT Hall of Fame, and to be with the people that are here today. I've got some. I've sort of got a speech ready for the induction ceremony, so I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to talk about, for example, a great moment with my beloved wife, Rita Molyneux, who's sitting over here. Wave at everybody, Rita. We had our first date 50 years from this coming January 9th. She was living in my condominium in Washington, D.C. while I was hiking in 1978. I'll just say a couple of things about I've been involved with the AT since 1974 when I became a member of the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. Became a life member, in fact, at the rate of $100 in 1975, and did very active in maintenance and trail construction weekends, and I maintained a section of the AT for two different sections over a total of about 20 years. In fact, for those of you who hike the trail, the Tick Farm, which is just north of Shenandoah National Park, and also the section of the trail up by Skyland in the park. And I won't go through my career stuff, but just to say that I worked for a number of national environmental and conservation organizations for more than 40 years, including quite a long bit of time at the Wilderness Society and at National Parks Conservation Association, where I met Cinda Waldbusser, who's sitting in the very back of this room. She is the new president CEO of ATC, incoming. And when I heard that Cinda had been chosen, I was ecstatic because I'd worked with her. I knew her background. I knew how much she knew how to work with the National Park Service, and she also knew how to work with nonprofit organizations. And so I'm really excited about that. But you know, one other thing I'll mention now, and then turn it over to my colleagues here, is I applied to be the head of ATC in 2011, and I was one of the two finalists. And I was not selected, and I sort of thought I was going to be chosen, and I, in fact, got a call from the recruiter. This is pretty unusual. I mean, the day after the announcement, she said, "I'm going to tell you something. My firm and me thought that you were the odds-on favorite and should have been picked. And so I just let you know, even though we're not supposed to say stuff like that." Well, 2 years later, he didn't work out so well, and I was called all this out of the blue, and they said, "Would you like the job now?" And I went, what in the world? But it was my dream job. I mean, it was, to be able. I live 50 miles away from Harper's Ferry. I commuted usually 5 times a day. It was a different era than now. I loved driving into Harper's Ferry early in the morning, especially when the thru hikers were coming through, and it was just a wonderful time. I'll talk more about that later. So let me stop and turn it over to our other panelists.
Yeah, Don?
Sure. Do you need me to
Sure.
speak?
I can move.
Yeah.
Okay, let me.
Okay,
be
we'll do a
helpful.
little bit of dance.
And again, that's for the camera, not for the room, so you still need to project.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do my best job of channeling Dick Anderson. I should lower my voice, having smoked all his life. He's got a great voice, and I'll just tell you how I became involved and why I'm representing Dick. I have never walked the entire AT, though I've probably walked about half of it in probably half the jurisdictions in which it's located. But I spent most of my time in Maine. I'm an Arctic alpine plant ecologist. And when Dick was finishing up his work in the Department of Conservation, he was the commissioner of the Department of Conservation, now the Department of Ag, Forestry, and Conservation in the state of Maine. He took on a job with the vision of returning caribou to the state of Maine. Dick's not here, so I can say it was a fool's errand, but he took the job and ran the caribou reintroduction program. And it just so happened they had to apply to the Baxter State Park Authority to discuss the possibility of returning caribou to Baxter State Park. And I was on a nascent Baxter State Park Scientific Advisory Committee. And I went to the meeting at which Dick was proposing that caribou be returned to the park. And one of the authority members said, "Well, what'll happen if those caribou get to the top of the mountain? And what's going to happen to the vegetation?" And I said, "Well, they'll eat it." And they said, "Well, what will be the impact?" And I said, "Well, we don't know, because no one's ever described that vegetation, so we don't have any quantified information about how that vegetation is made up and whatnot. So there will be an impact, and you won't be able to measure it." So, and I sat down, and then a week later, I'd never met this guy before. The phone rings in my office. "Don, Dick Anderson here." And talking to me like he'd known me all his life. And I'm sure a number of you have had that same experience with Dick. Instant, fast friends. And he invited me to go on a trip to the Gas Bay. And I'd like to think the rest is history at that point. That was 1989. And I went on that trip to see caribou at high elevation in the Chickasha Mountains with Dick. We went there in a helicopter, which was great. I know why botanists live longer than big mammal biologists, because the big mammal biologists take helicopters to go to the top of the mountains. Botanists walk to the top of the mountain. And so fast forward 5 years, another call. It's Friday night, the 16th of October, 1993. "Don!" "Hello, Dick." "You got to meet me at the Front Street Deli in Bath, Maine, tomorrow morning at 9. "Oh, great. Why?" I'll tell you when you get there. And I got there, and of course, he's in the very last booth. And he's looking around to make sure nobody else is seeing. He rolls out a map, and it's got little blue Denison sticky dots running from what is apparently Katahdin. The map had no names on it. It was just mountain range. And all the way up to the gas bay, and he had these little blue sticky dots all the way. And he said, "What do you think? We're going to extend the Appalachian Trail to the end of the gas bay." And I said, "Geez, that's a great idea, but they're going to hate it." And I was right. It was a great idea, and at least initially, it was not embraced until Dave Startzel called Dick the morning of our announcement of the trail on Earth Day in 1994. We worked on it, pulled together folks from New Brunswick, folks from Quebec, and made the announcement. And Joe Brennan, former Governor Joe Brennan, read this wonderful statement that Dick had written because it was Dick's idea. And Dave Startzel called Dick within hours, maybe 2 hours, and said, "Dick, just call it a connecting trail. Forget this extension. You're never going to be able to extend the trail. It's a national park. It would take an act of Congress to change the dimensions of it. So just call it a connecting trail." And from the next day, the second day of the project, we called the International Appalachian Trail a connecting trail, and the rest is history. So that's why I'm here representing Dick, and that's how Dick got us into this mess.
They died.
That's a different story.
I think we're overloaded with Mainers today.
That's awesome. That was going to be part of what I was going to say. My name is Janice Klein, and I'm currently president of the Maine Appalachian Trail Club. I'm really out of my element here. I feel like a newbie to the Appalachian Trail compared to a lot of you guys. I got into working on the Appalachian Trail because I'm a teacher, and I'm using my teacher voice, sort of. But I taught high school students for 50-plus years. And in the course of that, and getting interested in hiking, and I love everything about Maine, and that's why I'm so proud that there are 2 people who are associated with Maine that are going to be inducted. So I like history, I like Maine, I am a native Mainer, unlike many of the transplants. And many of those transplants that we're dealing with right now in the Maine Appalachian Trail Club came to Maine because they were working for the Maine Appalachian Trail Club, and they fell in love and just stayed. So I started a hiking club, and I got kids. I'd take 20 kids, 25 kids out onto a trail anywhere in a 50-mile radius of Bangor, Maine. And after doing that for a number of years and being the kind of teacher that I am, I said I need to get to give back to the trail. Many of you came to the trail to give back to it because of your own hiking experiences or because you knew somebody who was involved with the trail. So I talked to a colleague of mine, and I said, "How do I get onto the trail crew?" And he said, "You'll never get onto the AT trail crew, but you can perhaps get into to the Baxter State Park volunteer trail crew. And oh, by the way, that is supervised by Lester Kenway, who is also the supervisor for the Maine Appalachian Trail Club." So sure enough, I contacted Lester and Elsa, and the next thing I knew, I was volunteering in Baxter Park. After doing that a couple of years, and Lester knew me well enough, I asked about working with the Maine Appalachian Trail Club, and that was in 2001. I had to get one of my students to write me a recommendation because going through ATC, you had to do that. Once I had my credentials established with Lester and with the other members of MATC, I would just say, I want to come out and work with the trail crew such and such a week, and they would put me on. The way our organization works, and I suspect it's the same with a lot of your organizations, if you show some energy and you're new blood, they keep asking you to do more. So that's how I wind up with this. I came here because probably April, Dave Field, who many of you know, called me and said, "Hey, Janice, we're going to have Walter Green is going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame, and he has no relatives. He died in 1941, and I've got a little speech for later on about him and what the connection is. Clearly, I never met the man, but you've all seen the picture, or many of you have seen the pictures of him with his big basket and his tools, and he was out blazing and laying out the trail in the section where I do a lot of my work. So amongst the things that I do for MATC, and what got me even more involved, again, we have a lot of people, and they're mostly men, in the Maine Appalachian Trail Club, who when you say, what about this? They'll say, okay, but what about this as well? So I saw an ad in the club newsletter for a register box monitor. And I contacted the man who at that point was our club president, Don Stack. And next thing I knew, he's calling me and saying, I got another job. We need somebody to supervise the Ridge Runner at Gulf Haggis. It's an easy job. You only have to help set up a camp and visit a couple of times. So the rest is history, and that's how I ended up here. Walter Green, from what I've read, and I've seen stuff about him in a lot of different places, spent his summers on Sebec Lake, which was right near where I grew up. But he lived in a little village, which I checked on Google a week or so ago, still exists, about 150 people in the town. But he liked to explore. And again, we'll save some of that for later on. In the back, I don't know if you can all see it, Tony Barrett, a week or so ago, talked to Dave Field. Dave said, Janice is going to the induction, and Tony said, well, so am I, and so he contacted me. So each year, our club selects an award a recipient for the Walter Green Award. And they're nominated by people in the club. They cannot be somebody that's on the executive committee. And they are nominated for special service, outstanding service, above and beyond the normal maintaining. At the time that Tony was recognized, he had been on the executive committee, and Tony has done a lot for our club with regards to landscape protection, whether it was from wind farms, these days solar farms. So Tony was nominated, I don't remember by whom, and he was awarded the Walter Green Award. And so Tony schlepped this award down here from Maine this week, and then he's going to take the walking stick back so that I don't have to deal with people in the airline with trying to smuggle it on board. And the rest is history.
Oh, well, thank you. So I want to get into a little more depth with Bill.
Keep going, you're good.
Get into a little more depth with each of you. Ron, I remember many years ago you saying that you were surprised that the Appalachian Trail became so much a part of your career. And I'm curious how you got started with the AT, how you envisioned your career, and then how it got so involved with the AT for a half century.
Right, thanks. It started in 1972 when I began to, I was in law school, but I started doing a lot of hiking, and then right after that backpacking. And what I really remember is I did a trip, a 4-day trip in Southern Virginia, backpacking trip, and we finished. And I noticed, that on the third and fourth day, I felt really great. And I see a sign that says, this was in Mount Rogers, and said, Mount Katahdin, I think it said, 1,400 miles or whatever. And I thought, I would so much like to stay on this trail. I'm here on Monday morning. I've got to go back to work. Why can't I just keep hiking? So I made the decision to do a through hike because I got a phone call from one of my college friends who I hadn't talked to in years, and this was in the winter of 1978, and he said, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail this spring, and his name is Joe. I said, really? I said, and I hadn't even really thought much about it, and I went to bed and I couldn't go to sleep, and I said, I want to do that. I called him the next day and said, you want a partner? And the rest is history. So I did the trail, and from there I came back, and my next job was being a National Parks Program Director for the Wilderness Society. But I was able, with that job, to continue to be an advocate for the AT in Congress and with the federal agencies. And so that that inspired me professionally and personally to stay involved with the trail, particularly with the protection of the trail, and then thinking in a larger context, and I'll mention this afternoon, but when I became the head of ATC, and about 2 years into my dream job, I said, this trail is almost all quote protected. I mean, we just had a very few miles that were still on public roads, and that was usually where you cross a highway bridge or you were coming out of a small town. I mean, the trail, the corridor itself was an incredible land acquisition program that the Park Service and the Forest Service and dozens of federal and state agencies did. But I said, what about that larger landscape? I mean, we are the premier long distance hiking trail in the world, you could argue, but we're very well protected in some places, but try going across, central Pennsylvania or, northern Virginia. At that time, it was a 11-mile walk on a road. But the point was, what are we going to do to protect the vistas, the scenery, the natural resources, the wildlife? And so I talked with the National Park Service superintendent. In 2015, we launched the Appalachian Trail Landscape Partnership. And I'm still involved with the partnership, and it's made great success. It's made great progress. We have close relationships with the Appalachian Mountain Club, with the Open Space Institute, with with the Trust for Public Land, the Conservation Fund, local conservation groups, land trust groups, and so on. And it's to me it's the if I had to say, well, what one thing did you get involved with that you think was most important, it was probably that. So I'll stop there and save a bit for later on.
So a second question for you, Ron. You've been very involved with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy for many years, but also are credited as one of the founders of ALDA. To me, that's like being a member of the Hatfield and the McCoys. And how did you fit into both?
Well, as I recall, and Larry, correct me, I think we had a meeting. The way this organization, ALDA, was created was we had a weekend meeting in Harper's Ferry. And I'm thinking it was 1983, maybe? Is that right? Yeah. Got it. So, you
Yeah,
know.
whatever Warren says on that.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. You know, and you know, and certainly at that time, there was a number of people representing ATC that were in that discussion. And I will say that for most of history, the two organizations have worked very well collaboratively, and they still do in a number of ways. But I think that ALDA is about connecting with the hikers, and the ATC is involved in primarily protection of the trail, management of the trail with the 31 clubs now. And so the focus is a bit different, and we've had some great debates and discussions about all aspects of the AT, and its history, with ALDA, and I hope to continue that in a positive way.
So, one more question for you, Ron, and then
Yeah.
we'll diversify the load here a bit. So I think now you would be eligible for membership in the Old Pros, but you were a member for a long time. Tell us about the Old Pros and how you got involved.
Marty Dominy, where are you? Stand up. Okay, there's here the Old Pros, and then I'm going to add one thing. No, I have one thing at the end. When I come back, I got something to say. 2 minutes about supporting ATC, but I won't do that now. So here we are in, let's see, 1981, I believe, and several Ed Garvey, Dave Sherman, people that these are people that two of the people Ed Garvey everybody knows, and Dave Sherman most people know that are sitting in this room. And I and a guy named George Owen, we were doing a 100-mile backpack in southern North Carolina, the first full day we get to the first shelter in North Carolina as you're walking from Georgia, and it's sleeting. And we're scheduled to go 13 miles, and I'm pretending I'm the leader of this group, but you can't lead this group. So we get there, we've walked about 6 miles, it's about 40 degrees and it's still sleeting. And I kept saying, now guys, we can only stay here, for half an hour, and we got to keep moving, we got another 7 miles to go. A couple through hikers walk in, it's in April, and we start talking, and I keep saying, well, we got to move on. And one of the guys takes out his sleeping bag, and it just becomes, a clear ritual that they're not going anyplace. So we spent the night. And I did a couple of dumb things. One of them is I was trying to cook from lying within my sleeping bag, and I had one of those little stoves, and I knocked it over. And the next thing you know, I could have had the shelter burned down, but fortunately I wasn't. So we get to the next morning, and the two guys, young guys, get up and they eat their oatmeal, and they're getting ready to go leave. And they said, and at one point they asked us a question about you guys, and they said, yeah, we've been doing this and this, and we're really a bunch of old pros. And so they heard that, and they thought, oh, that's cute. So the next morning, as they're getting ready to leave, they look at us, and they say, well, thanks, it was so great to be with you guys, to be with the old pros. And the one thing we will say is, it tells us that if you guys could hike the whole trail, we can too.
Okay, Don, a question for you, and I believe are you still co-chair of the IAT?
Of our loosely connected international consortium, yes.
Okay, good. So how did you get from Cap Gaspé to Morocco?
How do we get from Cap Gaspé? Well, it goes back to the speech that Dick wrote for Joe Brennan to read at the press conference about thinking beyond borders and connecting common landscapes and shared values. I mean, I don't think he'd read Benton Mackay's paper that was published in a architectural journal in 1925, I think it was. But there was a lot of it that rang true in Dick's speech. And I think what happened, the way it happened was, I'll tell you. We were on the shores of the famous Restigouche River outside Kedgwick, New Brunswick. We were having our fall meeting. At that point, we all worked together, and we was about 6 of us each from Maine, New Brunswick, and Quebec. And we met on a quarterly basis in those days. And we were meeting for our fall meeting at an outfitter's lodge on the shores of the Restigouche. And 2 guys from Newfoundland came to the meeting. And Dick knew that they were going to come. A bunch of us had heard that these guys were going to crash our meeting. And they came to the meeting, and they proposed, for all the reasons that we had spoken on day one, that Newfoundland qualified. And it came right down to bedrock geology. And then all the other human values that they represented as a community of hikers in Newfoundland. And so on that day in November, we said, a number of people objected, saying, how can you have a trail that goes over the water? And we just put blinders on to that. We didn't address that. We just said, that's a good idea. And this is a story, this trail is a story about relationships, about connections, shared, in this case, shared geology. And so Newfoundland joined, and 2 years later, this is how we get to Morocco. That's how we get to Newfoundland. 2 years later, we have the 10th anniversary meeting. Again, it's back in New Brunswick in June on the shores of, in this case, the Tobique River, and which flows into the Wolastoq, otherwise known as the St. John. And we're on the shores of the Tobique, and a new representative from Maine attends his very first meeting. His name is Walter Anderson. He was, at that time, retired Maine State geologist. And Walter engaged everyone there about geologic heritage in particular, and began to congratulate us for a project that really, in his mind, was one of the best ways to tell anybody about the way the Earth works from a dynamic perspective, and a sort of geologic dynamic perspective. And because Walter began to prepare maps for us that showed where all these remnants of ancient Appalachian mountains, Pangean mountains, there really isn't a name for them. So we've made a couple of names up for them. The ancient Appalachian Range, which spanned Pangea when there was a single continent. One of the times there was a single continent on Earth. And he developed materials for us to take to all the meetings and to ATC meetings. And it just so happened that 2 geologists from the British Geological Survey in Scotland attended a Geological Society of America regional meeting that was held in Portland, Maine in March of 2009. And these 2 young geologists took an early version of this business card, which is two business cards plugged together, and had a map, not this map, but a similar map, and they took it back to their boss in Edinburgh. And the next day, the boss reads the email address of Dick Anderson and sends him an email and said, would you guys be willing to come to Scotland and talk to us about this idea? We're having similar conversations here about how our mountains are just like the mountains underneath the very famous Appalachian Trail. And we want our communities to be able to say, hey, we got a connection to the AT. And so Dick approached Roxanne Quimby, who, as many of you know, was the person who acquired the land that has become the National Monument east of Baxter State Park. And Dick was on her board of directors for the Quimby Family Foundation at the time, and he approached her and said, hey, Roxanne, I know we got a special fund for special projects, and I got a really good special project here. And so Roxanne bought our airplane tickets, and we went to Scotland, and we met with county councils, two county councils, one in Fort William and one farther north. And those folks were standing up geoparks, which at the time was a separate European Union project and not what it is now, which is a UN sanctioned activity. They were setting up geoparks, and they wanted the trails in they were asking if the trails in their geoparks could have an association through this shared geology. And of course, we said yes. Why not? And again, I think for Dick in particular, and this is about Dick, this isn't about anybody else but Dick. For Dick, it really was sort of a part of a vision that I probably once a week, he'll call me up and say, can you believe it, Don? Can you believe this has actually happened? That it was 30 years ago that we sat on Front Street. I mean, he reminds me over and over and over again. And I think for him, it's really is his words, which were similar to Benton Mackay's words, in envisioning a trail and what a trail could do for communities. Those folks in Scotland wanted economic development. They have the lowest population density in all of Europe in northwest Scotland. Those little towns are dying on the vine, and they need every little bit of something special that they can have. And they just thought a connection to the AT would be the cat's pajamas. If they could say they had a relationship to the Appalachian Trail, the grandmother, most famous long-distance trail in the world, they knew it, and then this trail that connected to that trail would help them economically. And so I think that's probably, and then everybody else wanted to, they heard about that, and then everywhere else there was a trail in a rural part of northwestern Europe said, oh geez, we want to participate too. And the French Ramblers Association got in touch, and anyway, it happened.
So today we're at 25 countries and a prospective 10,000 miles out of...
No. I think it's 13 countries, 3 continents. And I've got to tell you that I was talking to Will French on the drive down yesterday. It's not easy. We talk about herding cats. We don't have a common organization. We don't have a shared treasury. We'd need treaties between countries. We need a UN charter to create a single organization that you could run and
Thanks a lot.
and direct people. We've given up the idea of having anything more than the people who are in those countries and want to have an association with this idea. It's a pretty low bar for saying your trail can participate. And I think we've got to recognize that the IAT really isn't a long-distance trail. It's a community of people with shared values. And they come and go. Currently, we're struggling with New Brunswick. Canadians like to fund their trail maintenance through government, and New Brunswick is the poorest province in Canada. And they're currently trying to figure out how they're going to keep the IAT open. But, you know, it comes and goes in all these places, and somebody, if the idea is going to survive, I think we'll have to just allow the community, the larger shared international community, license to make it work the way it works best for them.
We only have a few minutes left. Jim Fettig has joined the panel to talk about Marion Park, so why don't you go ahead?
Great.
Just,
Yeah, please, Jim.
Thank you. I'm Jim Fettig. I'm the president of PATC, and I'm speaking on behalf of Marion Park. And I'll tell you a little bit about her story. You know, in terms of at least PATC and the trail itself, everybody knows the story of the founding fathers, Benton MacKay and Myron Avery. And Avery is a central figure here. He founded PATC in 1927 out of with several of his friends from the Washington Wildflower Protection Society. But what nobody knows is what the role of the founding mothers was. And there are many of them throughout the trail, but in particular with PATC. So while Avery and his buddies were off blazing and doing whatever they wanted to do, it was the women who built the club, kept it together, and did the hard work. Is that not unfamiliar to people? One of the first things you notice when you look at our archives is how many women are in the pictures from that time. Yeah. There are always more women than men, mostly. Can't use an absolute like that, but I'll tell you, in the majority of the pictures, there are more women than men out in the field working. And I'm not talking about picnicking. I'm talking about they've got loppers in their hands and picks and shovels and those kinds of things. I think that may be from the genesis of the Washington Wildflower Protection Society, but it doesn't matter. They were there, and their role has not always been remembered, and that's why it's so important today that we talk about Marion Park. Marion joined PATC in 1933, and she became Avery's closest associate. She started out by editing the club newsletter. She eventually became the club's secretary in the sense that she was the real secretary of the organization, not just Avery's admin assistant. She and Gene Stevenson played a very critical role as the office staff, though, and sometimes typing as many as 20 letters a day for Avery. So that gives you some insight into Avery's personality also. Today we call it spam. By 1941, she replaced Harlene James as the ATC secretary, while simultaneously remaining the PATC secretary. She served in this dual role until 1955. That's 14 years. For 20 years, she was also one of Avery's key lieutenants in the field, helping to scout, lop, and blaze right alongside everybody else. That's not known hardly at all. And the key thing is, when Avery took his wheel and a sign to the top of Katahdin to establish the northern terminus, she was there. She was part of that crew that went up to do that. Now, as often happens in the club today, and I see people in this room that I know that have influence far beyond where they live or where they volunteer and so on and so forth, her influence extended a long way. She also founded the Maine Appalachian Trail Club and served as its treasurer for 20 years. And that is a legacy and a story to be told. And I want to read you something here. A friend of mine, a Maine writer named Tom Ricks, who used to be a Washington Post reporter, he wrote a book recently, it's just been published, called Nobody's Coming to Save You. And in that book, there's a phrase or a couple sentences that I think that matter here. Humans are the only animal that uses fire, and the only one that uses narrative. So the most human activity in the world may be the telling of stories around a campfire. So here's hoping that Marion Parks' story will be told around campfires on the AT for generations to come.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And Ron, I see you writing. Do you have some additional
Well,
remarks?
I have two things. First of all, our grandson and his mother and our grandson's sister have all joined us. And Oliver's going to start hiking, certainly by his third birthday. The other thing I wanted to mention, and by the way, our son, who was just here for a minute, he hiked his age in miles each year till he became 12 and he started playing lacrosse. So every year we'd go, okay, it's 11 miles this year, right? And we would do it. One thing I just want to say quickly, and I'll talk about this later. I have gotten very involved again with ATC, I am now, just as of the last couple of weeks, this is our 100th anniversary, and we have something called the Centennial Advisory Committee, which I'm now the co-chair, and we have a goal. This is an ATC goal of raising $50 million over 5 years. Now, of that, $25 million is money that we were expecting to come in from private funds, but the other $25 million is what we're matching. We're end of year 2, and we are now at a total of between $35 and $36 million. We received a $5 million grant from a foundation, a family foundation, just came in the Dunleavy Foundation, and it's real. We've really, and this is really, and we've just got a new brochure that tells you exactly how this money is going to be distributed. So I just bring this up because I am now the co-chair, and there are donors that are sitting in this room. Thank you very much. But if you're interested in contributing in any way possible, please let me know, and we will be happy to talk.
Okay, thanks, Ron. We have about 5 minutes left. Any questions from the audience? So, if not, maybe each of you could, give an additional minute summary. And my understanding was that New Englanders were laconic, so let's see if that's true. Don, you want to start off?
Well, I should probably tell you all that Dick is really sorry that he couldn't be here. It's just not possible. He's approaching. He's approaching 91. Yeah, 91. I thought it was 92. It's 91. We're going to have a party for him on December 5th, and we're going to have a kind of a redo of this ceremony and celebrate his induction at a place called Ocean View in Falmouth, Maine. We're also going to celebrate Walter Anderson at the same time. Walter is going to be 96 in February. And so Walter's going to be the recipient of what will eventually become, the first recipient of what will eventually become the Anderson Thinking Beyond Borders Award. So we'll present to Dick on Friday, the 5th of December, his walking stick, and I'll share with that crowd what this ceremony and what the day was like and whatnot, and then we'll also give an award to Walter. And I know Dick recognizes this as an amazing honor, and maybe we'll try to capture his words and send them back to you guys.
Great. And Janice, maybe you can tell us, why you picked Walter Green for that award and how much he means to the club.
I can't really, because that was long before my time. That's been going on since well before I became involved with the club. But I will say, it's really interesting in listening here how much of a role the Maine Appalachian Trail Club and the AT in Maine have played. Part of that is due to Myron Avery, because if it hadn't been for him, the trail would have stopped at Mount Washington. But when you hear all the people here that have been involved with the Maine Appalachian Trail Club, and listening to Don talk about Dick Anderson, I've never met Dick. I just remember that for years he organized a winter social, and it was in Freeport, and it was always during teachers' school February vacation, so I never got a chance to go. But there must be something about the Maine Appalachian Trail Club that keeps people living a long, long time. So we have people like John Neff, who I think the last time he climbed Katahdin was for his 90th birthday. For many years maintained the section of the Hunt Trail. Our latest newsletter has a couple of articles by Steve Clark, who was also a member of the Hall of Fame. And you could go online and find this. He wrote this nice little article for this edition about he and his then wife doing a maintenance job in the late 50s, and this woman wearing jeans and carrying a bedroll and wearing sneakers came by. She apparently never introduced herself, but they ended up taking her into town for a meal and then put her back on the trail. So, Grandma Gatewood. We have Dave Field. When I was at the VLM in August, and some of the clubs were talking about term limits. We can't replace Dave Field. If you want to know anything about Myron Avery and his correspondence, you contact Dave Field. He has it all. And he's in at least his mid-80s. So that just attests to the staying power of people that are involved with the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, Ron, any additional remarks?
The only thing I would say, because I know Bill's back there telling us it's time to move on, is, the best thing about my job at ATC, and this would apply, I think, to volunteers as well, was to be able to go out and hike. I knew when the through hikers were coming through certain places, so I would hike south when they're coming north and not tell them who I am, and have these 25 or 30 through hikers talk to them, and ask them, tell me about your hike. Tell me about what's good about the trail. Tell me about things that you think could be good. Give me honest answers. I want to know. And rarely did we ever get to the point where I would tell them who I was. But when they did, it was, oh my God, we gotta take a photo of you. But it was what I heard. And this is the important thing, because you hear a lot about people smoking pot and they're doing this and they're groups and they're just out messing around the trail and sitting in shelters. 90% or more of the through hikers that I talked to said, I'm having a great experience. This is a wonderful thing, and it's what I thought it would be. And yeah, there's some people that smoke dope, but they usually stay on their own. So, yep.
Well, I know why Mainers live so long. The trail's so hard. You get so much exercise.
Exactly.
There's no question about it. It's also my favorite place on the AT. What I'd say about us, we're about to celebrate our centennial in 2027. And we've done some preliminary planning. We'll do the real serious planning here this year. But we're going to celebrate it with our partners. And with all the other, we'll try to get everybody involved to a certain extent. We're one of the original clubs. Our founders played a disproportionate role in the founding of the trail. Nobody knows in Washington, nobody knows who the heck we are. So we've got to solve that problem, and so on and so forth. But the idea is it's really a national treasure, and we just want to make sure that people know that.
So let's have a round of applause for these.